On a distant planet in the galaxy, where the sun barely touched the surface and strange blue plants grew wild, a young alien girl named Lyra wandered the fields. Her world was full of quiet beauty, forests of shimmering trees and wide-open skies that stretched beyond what her eyes could see. Lyra had always felt different from the other creatures of her planet, her skin glowing softly in the light, and her large, round eyes reflecting a curiosity that could never be fully satisfied. But what truly set her apart was her fascination with the unknown, an interest that led her to look beyond her home and into the stars. One day, while exploring the edge of the dense forest, Lyra stumbled upon a strange sight, something that had never been seen before by anyone from her world. A ship, sleek and shining, landed softly on the soft grass. It was unlike any of the ships from her people. It made a gentle hum as it settled onto the ground, and for a moment the world around Lyra seemed to stand still. From the hatch of the ship, a human emerged. Lyra had heard stories about humans, tall, strong, and curious beings who traveled across the stars. But seeing one in person was completely different. This human, dressed in a suit of silver and blue, appeared to be lost in thought. His gaze wandered over the land, taking in the beauty of the planet, but he didn't seem to notice Lyra standing just a few feet away. She was frozen in place, unsure of what to do. She had never seen a human before. She had never even imagined that they could be so close to her world. With her curiosity getting the best of her, she took a cautious step forward. The soft rustling of the grass under her feet caught the human's attention. He turned, and their eyes met. His were a deep brown, full of experience and wisdom, but it was the way his gaze softened when he saw her that made Lyra's heart beat faster. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. The human's expression was a mixture of surprise and wonder. "Hello," Lyra said, her voice softer than she had meant it to be. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 questions. She had never spoken to a human before, and the only way she knew how to communicate was through the translator device she wore around her neck. The human looked at her with interest, then at the device on her neck. "You can speak our language?" Lyra nodded, feeling both proud and nervous at the same time. She had spent years learning about different languages, including the human one, but hearing it spoken by a real human made her feel like she was in the presence of something extraordinary. "I've been exploring your planet," the human said, stepping closer. "My name is Marcus, and you are?" "I am Lyra," she replied, feeling her cheeks warm as she said her name out loud for the first time to another being. "What brings you here?" "I was sent to study the life here," Marcus explained, glancing around at the alien plants. "But it looks like I've found something much more interesting." Lyra smiled shyly, her eyes not leaving his. She could feel something growing between them, a connection that was undeniable. She had always been curious, but now, standing before him, she felt a different kind of curiosity, a need to understand him, to know who he was and where he came from. They spent the next few hours talking. Lyra learned about Marcus's planet, his, Earth, and about the missions he had been part of. She was amazed by his stories of human cities, flying machines, and the endless vastness of space. She had only known the peaceful, simple life of her planet, and hearing about the human world made her wonder what it would be like to see it for herself. For the first time, Lyra didn't feel alone in the universe. She had always longed to understand the stars, to know what lay beyond her planet's horizons. Now, standing with Marcus, she realized that there was a whole new world out there, and it was one that she wanted to explore too. As the sun began to set, the two of them found themselves sitting on a hill looking out at the sky. The colors of the sunset danced in the sky, vivid oranges, pinks, and purples that lit up the clouds in a beautiful display. The wind was soft, and the world seemed peaceful, as if the universe had paused to give them a moment alone. "I wish I could stay longer," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "But I have to leave soon." Lyra felt a pang of sadness at his words. She had only just met him, but already she couldn't imagine life without him in it. She had so many questions, so many things she wanted to know about him. But most of all, she realized that she had feelings for him, feelings she didn't fully understand yet. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at her, his eyes softening. "I will," he promised, his voice gentle. "But for now, you need to grow. You're not ready yet." Lyra frowned, not understanding what he meant. "Not ready?" "For what I mean," Marcus replied, his tone tender but firm. "You're young, Lyra, and I'm not sure if I can be what you need right now." His words stung, but Lyra didn't argue. She felt the weight of his words, though she didn't quite understand them. She had never considered age as something that would stand in the way of what she felt. "I'll wait," Lyra said simply, her voice filled with determination. She didn't understand everything, but she knew one thing. For sure, she would wait for him, no matter how long it took. Marcus gave her a small, sad smile. "I'll be back," he promised once again, and with that he stood, walking back toward his ship. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Lyra watched him go, her heart heavy with a longing she didn't yet understand. But deep down, she knew that this was just the beginning. She would wait for him, grow stronger, and one day, when the time was right, she would stand before him as an equal, ready for whatever came next. Years passed since Lyra last saw Marcus. In those years, much had changed on her home planet. The once peaceful world had seen many trials, from strange weather patterns to unsettling earthquakes. Yet none of it compared to the quiet ache in her chest, the longing for a human she had met only briefly, but had already left a deep mark on her heart. At first, she had tried to distract herself. She threw herself into the teachings of her people, learning about their history, culture, and the deep connections they shared with the land. But no matter how hard she worked, Marcus remained in her thoughts. The feeling of his presence, his soft words, and the kindness in his eyes seemed to follow her, no matter where she went. In her quiet moments, she would think back to that day. She remembered the warmth of the setting sun, how it cast golden light over the horizon, and how he had looked at her, not as a child, but as someone with potential, someone who could be something more. His words echoed in her mind. "Come back when you're older?" She wasn't sure what he meant by that, but she knew that she had to grow. She had to be ready. Ready for what? She didn't know, but she was determined to find out. The years on her planet were different from those on Earth. Lyra's species lived longer lives, and while she had only been a child when she met Marcus, she was now in the prime of her youth. With each passing day, she trained herself. She became stronger, faster, and more skilled. Her people had always valued wisdom and peace, but Lyra knew that in order to return to Marcus as he had asked, she needed to grow in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. She learned from the elders, studying the ancient teachings of her people. She spent hours practicing the arts of diplomacy, understanding how to mediate disputes and build peaceful relations. She read about the stars and the other worlds her people had never seen, learning about the vastness of the universe and the connections between different civilizations. Her natural beauty, once something that she had been shy about, now radiated with a quiet confidence. Her skin, once soft and delicate, had toughened with time and training. Her eyes, always large and expressive, were now filled with determination. She had become a leader among her people, someone they turned to for advice and guidance. But no matter how much she changed, her heart remained the same. She still longed for the human who had once told her to wait. The passage of time had a different effect on Marcus. When Lyra first met him, he had been full of youthful enthusiasm and excitement, eager to explore the galaxy. But as the years passed, he became more serious. His time on Earth had shaped him into a highly respected astronaut and scientist, known for his discoveries and his leadership. Yet, even as his reputation grew, a part of him never forgot about Lyra. The memory of her bright eyes, her soft voice, and the promise he had made to return stayed with him. There had been many times when he had wondered if he had made the right choice in telling her to wait. He had thought of her often, especially during his long missions in space. The vastness of the universe felt different when he thought about her. He had traveled to distant worlds and met countless people, but none of them seemed to fill the void that Lyra had left behind. Though Marcus had tried to push aside his feelings, they never quite went away. He had continued his work, traveled to new places, and made new discoveries, but there was always a lingering thought in the back of his mind. Did Lyra still remember him? Did she still wait for him, as she had promised? He had told her to come back when she was older. But in the years since, Marcus found himself wondering if he had made the right decision. Was she ready? Was he? Time had a way of changing things, of making everything feel both distant and near. One day, as Marcus sat at his desk on Earth, reviewing reports from his latest expedition, his mind wandered back to Lyra. He couldn't help but think of the promise he had made. He had always intended to return, but there had been so many other things demanding his attention. The peace talks, the scientific research, the push for human expansion across the galaxy, all of it had kept him busy. Yet, despite all the work, all the progress humanity had made, there was still something missing, something he had left behind on that faraway planet. He stood up, pacing around his office, as he made the decision that had been building in his mind for years. He would return. He would go back to the planet where he had met Lyra to see if she was ready. But he didn't know what to expect. She had been so young back then, and he had been so unsure of what he wanted. Would she still remember him? Would she still want to see him after all these years? He knew one thing for certain. He had to find out. The feeling of missing something in his life was too strong to ignore any longer. Meanwhile, Lyra's journey continued. She had grown into a young woman of strength and wisdom, respected by her people and admired by all who knew her. Yet there was a quiet sadness in her heart, a longing for something she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the physical training or the knowledge she had gained over the years. It was the pull of a promise made, the hope that someday, somehow Marcus would return. She thought of him often, of the warmth in his eyes when he had looked at her that day. She remembered his promise and the gentle words he had spoken, words that had been etched into her heart. She hadn't known what they meant then, but now she understood. She had to grow. She had to become someone who could stand beside him, not as a child, but as an equal. And so she waited, knowing that the day would come when she would finally see him again. It might take years, it might take longer, but Lyra was patient. She had learned that in time, everything would fall into place. The universe had a way of making things right, and when the time was truly right, Marcus would come back. She would be ready. The years had passed, and for Lyra, it had felt like a lifetime. She had grown stronger, more confident, and wiser. The once shy girl was now a respected leader, admired by those around her. But despite all her achievements, there was still something missing in her life, the one thing she had waited for all these years. She had kept her promise to Marcus. She had waited, grown, and changed, just as he had asked. Now, the time had come. One quiet morning, as Lyra stood on the balcony of her home, gazing out over the vast landscape of her planet, she saw something in the sky. a tiny dot growing larger by the second. At first, she thought it was a bird, but then it became clear. A ship, a human ship. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be him? The ship descended slowly, touching down on the grass with a soft hum. Lyra felt a rush of emotions flood through her. There was excitement, of course, but also nervousness. What if he didn't remember her? What if he had moved on in all these years? She had changed so much. Was she still the same girl he had once met? She didn't know the answers to these questions, but one thing was certain. She was ready to face whatever came next. As the ship doors opened, a familiar figure stepped out. It was him, Marcus. He was older now, his face more weathered, his hair a little grayer, but his eyes still held that warmth and curiosity she had remembered. His gaze swept over the planet, taking in the unfamiliar sights. But when his eyes met hers, the world seemed to slow down. For a moment, neither of them moved. It was as if the years between them had vanished, leaving only the connection they shared. "Lyra," Marcus said, his voice soft but full of emotion. "I didn't know if you would be here." "I promised I would wait," she replied, her voice steady but filled with a quiet excitement. They stood there for a long moment, simply looking at each other, the distance between them filled with memories of the past. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've changed. You've become someone I never imagined." Lyra smiled, a small, shy smile. "I had to grow. You told me to come back when I was older. I kept my word." Marcus nodded, his heart heavy with emotion. He had never fully understood what he had meant when he said those words to her. But now, seeing her standing before him, strong and confident, he realized that she had become something much more than he could have ever imagined. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a leader, someone capable of great things. "I see that," Marcus said, his voice thick with admiration. "But I don't know if I'm ready for what that means." Lyra felt a pang of doubt, but she pushed it aside. She had waited for this moment for so long. She had been ready for years, but now she wondered if Marcus was. "Are you saying you've come all this way and now you're unsure?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Marcus took a deep breath, struggling with his own feelings. "I've never been good at this, at emotions, at understanding what it is I'm supposed to do. I came here because I couldn't stop thinking about you. But now that I'm here, I don't know what to say, what to do." Lyra looked at him carefully, reading the conflict in his eyes. She understood. She had been afraid of this too, but she couldn't let fear stand in the way of what she knew to be true. "You don't need to say anything," she said softly. "You just need to be here." Marcus was taken aback by her words. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes. The waiting is the hardest part," Lyra explained. "I've waited all these years for you to come back, but the truth is we've both grown. We're different now, and that's okay." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The weight that had been on his chest for so long seemed to lift. Lyra wasn't asking for him to have all the answers. She wasn't expecting him to know exactly what to do. She just wanted him to be there, in the moment, with her. "You've become someone remarkable," Marcus said, his voice sincere. I'm proud of you." Lyra's eyes softened. "I did it for you," she said quietly, "for the promise I made." They stood there for a few moments, the world around them silent as they shared a moment of understanding. Lyra had kept her promise to grow, to change, to become who she needed to be. But now Marcus had to do the same. He had to face the feelings that had been buried for so long, the love he had for her that he had denied. He had to accept that the girl he had once met was no longer a child. She was someone who could stand beside him as an equal. "I don't know what happens next," Marcus said, his voice unsure but hopeful. But I want to find out. With you. Lyra smiled, her heart filled with warmth. That's all I need. We'll figure it out together. For the first time in years, Marcus felt at peace. The uncertainty that had weighed on him for so long seemed to fade away, replaced by the quiet confidence that everything would be all right. Lyra was no longer the shy, unsure girl he had once known. She was someone who could stand tall, someone who had already found her place in the world. And now, it was his turn to find his place beside her. As they turned and walked toward the horizon, the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape. The world seemed full of possibilities, new adventures, new challenges, and a future they would face together. They didn't know what the future would hold, but they knew one thing. They would face it side by side, with no more waiting, no more uncertainty. The time for promises had passed. Now it was time for them to write their own story, together. The days that followed Marcus's return were filled with quiet moments, as the two of them began to rebuild the connection they had once shared. Though the years had changed them both, Lyra and Marcus quickly found comfort in each other's presence once more. The planet, with its peaceful landscapes and vibrant colors, became the perfect backdrop for their slow, steady reconnection. The first evening they spent together was simple. Lyra had invited Marcus to a small village where her people lived, a place that had always felt like home to her. The villagers welcomed him warmly, offering him food and drinks that were unfamiliar to him, but somehow tasted like the essence of this alien world. Lyra, still somewhat shy around him, watched as he interacted with her people, his natural curiosity making him blend in effortlessly. As they walked along a path that led out of the village, Marcus felt the calm that the planet seemed to offer. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of alien flowers that he could never name. The sky stretched endlessly, the stars shining like tiny beacons in the night. Lyra walked beside him, her quiet presence reassuring. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Marcus didn't know what to say. He had come here with so many questions, but now that he was with Lyra, the questions didn't seem so important. He could feel the warmth of her beside him, her presence more comforting than anything he had ever known. Finally, Lyra spoke, breaking the silence. Do you still wonder what it would have been like if you hadn't asked me to wait? Marcus turned to look at her. Her face was serene, the soft glow of the moonlight casting shadows across her features. I used to, he admitted. But now, I don't think I wonder anymore. I think I've been afraid of what it means to be with you. Lyra's heart tightened slightly, but she didn't show it. She had always known that their bond would take time to heal, that the emotional distance they had both created over the years would be difficult to bridge. But hearing him say the words aloud was different. You don't have to be afraid, Marcus, she said gently. We're both different now. I'm not the same girl I was when I first met you. And you're not the same either. His gaze softened, and for the first time, Marcus truly saw her, not just as the alien girl he had met years ago, but as the strong, beautiful woman she had become. She wasn't just someone from another world anymore. She was someone who could stand beside him, who could face the future with him. I know, he said quietly. But even now, I'm still trying to figure out how to fit into your world. You don't have to fit in, Lyra replied. You just have to be here. That's enough for me. Her words were simple, but they had a profound effect on him. The weight that he had carried around for so long, his doubts, his worries, seemed to lift for the first time. He didn't need to be someone he wasn't. He just needed to be himself, to stand beside her as they both found their place in the universe. That evening, as they watched the stars together, Lyra shared stories about her people, about their history, their struggles, and their triumphs. She spoke of the peaceful coexistence they had once known with the other species on the planet, and of the recent challenges they had faced. The world was changing, she said, but her people had adapted, as they always did. The future, though uncertain, was something they would face together. Marcus listened intently, fascinated by her strength and the wisdom in her words. He had always admired her, but now he saw her in a new light. She wasn't just a young girl he had met long ago. She was a leader, someone capable of guiding her people through whatever came next. He could sense the power in her, both physically and emotionally. She was more than ready for the challenges ahead, and he was proud of her. As the days passed, Marcus found himself becoming more and more at ease with Lyra and her people. The language barrier, which had once seemed so difficult, no longer felt like an obstacle. He learned to communicate more effortlessly with the villagers, who accepted him with open arms. He began to see their world in a new light. This wasn't just a place of mystery and wonder. It was a home, a place that had shaped Lyra into the person she had become. Their connection deepened, too. Lyra had always kept her feelings for Marcus close to her heart, but now she found herself opening up to him in ways she never had before. She shared her dreams, her hopes for the future, and the fears she had about the planet's future. Marcus listened to her with the kind of attention she had always longed for. They began to spend more time together, not just in the village, but also out in the wild, exploring the forests and hills that Lyra had known since she was a child. They walked through lush valleys, where the trees seemed to whisper secrets to the wind. They climbed mountains where the view stretched out for miles, offering a glimpse of the entire planet below them. They would sit for hours, talking about everything and nothing, as if the universe was theirs to explore. One afternoon, as they rested on a cliff overlooking a sparkling lake, Marcus turned to Lyra. "Do you ever wonder if we're ready for what comes next?" Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the beauty of the world around them. "I used to wonder, but now I think we are. We've both had time to grow, and now it's time to face whatever happens, together." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of calm settle in his chest. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being there, being present, and walking through life side by side with the person you cared about most. "I don't have all the answers," Marcus said, his voice sincere. "But I'm ready to try." Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady and confident. "That's all we need. We'll figure it out, one step at a time." And in that moment, under the vast sky that stretched above them, Marcus finally realized that he didn't need to have everything figured out. He didn't need to be perfect. All that mattered was that they had found each other again, and that, together, they could face whatever challenges awaited them. Their journey had only just begun. But as they sat together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, both of them felt a quiet certainty deep in their hearts. The future was uncertain, but with each other they could face anything. Together they were ready. The days of peace on the planet were not meant to last forever. Tensions had been rising in the nearby regions, where a faction of rebels, unhappy with the changes brought by the peace talks, had begun causing unrest. Lyra, now a respected leader, was tasked with helping maintain the fragile peace. Her people looked to her for guidance, and Marcus stood beside her, ready to assist in any way he could. One evening, as they sat in Lyra's chambers discussing the ongoing situation, a messenger arrived with urgent news. The rebel faction had taken control of a vital energy plant, threatening to disrupt the entire planet's power supply. The situation was dire, and if left unchecked, it could lead to a war, one that Lyra's people were not prepared to fight, or mash. "Have to act quickly," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "If they destroy the power grid, it will set us back years in terms of recovery." The entire planet could fall into chaos. Marcus, who had been listening closely, stood up and walked over to the large window that overlooked the city. And if we don't act, what happens then? If we don't act fast enough, the rebels will take more than just the power supply. They'll control the planet's resources. We could lose everything we've worked for, Lyra said, her eyes distant. As she considered the weight of the situation, Marcus turned to face her, his expression serious. Then we go after them. We'll stop them together. Lyra met his gaze, feeling the weight of the decision. She knew the risks involved. This mission could end in disaster, and even if they succeeded, the cost would be high. But there was no other choice. The future of her people, the peace they had fought for, depended on it. She couldn't back down. We leave at dawn, Lyra said, her voice firm. Prepare yourself, Marcus. This won't be easy. The following day, Lyra and Marcus set out on a mission that would test both of them in ways they hadn't imagined. They traveled through dense forests, crossed rushing rivers, and scaled rocky hills, all while keeping their eyes on the goal ahead, the energy plant. Lyra's people had long since abandoned most of their modern technologies, but this plant was still vital to the planet's energy needs, and the rebels knew that taking it would give them ultimate power. As they neared the plant, the landscape changed. The peaceful beauty of Lyra's planet was replaced by a grim reality. The air was thick with tension, and the once vibrant forest now seemed dark and ominous. The rebels had set up camp around the plant, their weapons at the ready, watching for anyone who might try to approach. Lyra and Marcus moved quietly, staying low to the ground and using the natural cover provided by the trees. They worked together, their bond growing stronger with every step. The world around them seemed to disappear as they focused solely on the task at hand. Marcus was impressed by how easily Lyra navigated the land, her movements graceful and sure. She had grown into someone powerful, someone who could handle anything that came her way. Finally, they reached the edge of the camp. They could see the energy plant in the distance, its towering structure still standing strong despite the rebels' efforts to take it down. Lyra's heart raced. This was it, the moment they would either succeed or fail. She turned to Marcus. "Are you ready?" Marcus nodded, his face set in determination. "I've never been more ready." Together they moved forward. The rebels hadn't spotted them yet, but time was running out. They needed to act quickly. Lyra gave a signal, and Marcus followed her lead. They silently infiltrated the camp, taking down a few of the rebels who had been stationed on the outskirts. They moved with precision, each step calculated, knowing that if they made one mistake, everything would fall apart. The further they went, the more they could hear the sounds of the rebels' voices, shouting orders and preparing for something. It was clear they were getting ready for a fight. But Lyra and Marcus weren't going to let that happen. They had to stop them before the situation escalated any further. As they reached the entrance of the plant, they were spotted. The rebels, now aware of their presence, charged toward them. A fierce battle broke out, and Marcus found himself in the thick of it. He fought with everything he had, his training kicking in as he defended himself and Lyra. The energy plant, once a symbol of peace, now became a battleground filled with chaos and violence. But Lyra was not just standing back and watching. She was fighting right beside him, her strength evident as she moved quickly and decisively. She used her knowledge of the land to her advantage, disarming several rebels and leading Marcus through the fray. He couldn't help but feel awe for her. As they fought together, she wasn't just the alien girl he had met years ago. She was a warrior, a leader, and someone who could hold her own in any battle. Despite their best efforts, the rebels had numbers on their side. Lyra and Marcus fought fiercely, but it seemed as though the odds were against them. Just when it seemed like they might be overwhelmed, Lyra made a bold decision. She saw the control room in the distance and knew that if they could reach it and shut down the plant, the rebels would have no reason to continue the fight. "We need to get to the control room," Lyra shouted to Marcus, her voice filled with urgency. Now! Marcus nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Together they made a run for the building, dodging fire and taking down any rebels that tried to stop them. As they reached the door, Lyra quickly unlocked it and pushed it open. They were inside the control room now, and all that stood between them and victory was the final switch. Marcus reached for the controls, his hands shaking as he prepared to shut down the plant. But just as he was about to pull the lever, a rebel leader appeared, blocking their path. "You're too late," the rebel leader sneered, his weapon drawn. "This is ours now." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "Not today." With a quick movement, she disarmed the leader, and Marcus, seeing the opening, pushed the switch. The energy plant powered down, the lights flickering, and then going dark. The rebels, realizing they had lost, quickly retreated, leaving Lyra and Marcus victorious but exhausted. The battle had been hard, and though they had won, the cost was clear. There would be more challenges ahead, but for now they had secured peace once again. As the dust settled and the sounds of the battle faded away, Marcus turned to Lyra, his heart filled with admiration. She had done it. She had led them to victory. And through it all, she had never lost sight of what mattered most, the future of her people. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Lyra looked at him, her expression calm but tired. Together. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the landscape. Lyra and Marcus stood side by side, looking out at the peaceful valley below them. The aftermath of the battle with the rebels was still fresh in their minds, but the victory they had achieved filled the air with a sense of calm. They had secured the energy plant, restored peace to the planet, and proven to themselves that they could face any challenge together. The energy plant, once a symbol of power and conflict, now stood silent in the distance, its once shimmering lights darkened. The rebels had been pushed back, and the planet's resources were safe. Lyra's people had proven their resilience once again, and the promise of a brighter future seemed closer than ever. But there was still the matter of what came next. Lyra turned to Marcus, her face calm, but filled with thought. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the gentle breeze that ruffled her hair. "We won, but I can't help but wonder, what happens now? What comes after this?" Marcus, standing beside her, looked at the scene unfolding in front of them, the distant hills, the vibrant skies, the peaceful villages that dotted the land. He had spent so much of his life searching for answers, trying to understand the universe and the people within it. But in this moment, standing with Lyra, he felt as though he had found the one thing that mattered most. "We move forward," Marcus said softly, "one step at a time. Together." Lyra glanced at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and determination. She had grown so much over the years. She had once been the young girl who dreamed of exploring the stars, who had waited patiently for the man who had promised to return. Now, she was a leader, someone who had faced battles, made decisions, and sacrificed for the greater good. But even with all that she had accomplished, she still had questions about the future. "Do you think we're ready for what's to come?" Lyra asked, her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of uncertainty. Marcus turned to her, his gaze steady and sure. He could see the strength in her, the quiet confidence that had been built over the years. She was no longer the shy, uncertain girl he had first met. She was a woman, a leader, someone who had earned her place in the world. "I don't know if anyone is ever truly ready for what comes next," Marcus said. "But I do know this. We have each other, and with that, we can face whatever challenges lie ahead." The air around them seemed to grow warmer, the sunlight bathing the land in a soft glow. In that moment, the world felt peaceful, as though it had taken a deep breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The villagers had gathered nearby, celebrating their victory, offering thanks and praise to both Lyra and Marcus for their bravery. Yet in the quiet of the morning, away from the noise of the celebrations, Lyra and Marcus stood alone, finding comfort in each other's presence. They had been through so much together, and despite the hardships, there was something undeniably special between them, a bond forged in battle, trust, and time. "You've changed," Marcus said after a moment of silence, his voice filled with admiration. "When I first met you, I saw someone who was full of promise. But now, I see someone who has become a true leader. You've built something here, Lyra. You've given your people hope." Lyra's cheeks flushed slightly at his words, but she didn't look away. "I didn't do it alone. We've all worked together to build this future. And now that we've won, there's still so much to do." Marcus smiled at her, understanding the weight of her words. "There's always work to be done, but it's the journey that matters, and the people you walk with." For a long time, they stood there in silence, simply taking in the world around them. Marcus realized that the feeling of home was not a place. It was the people you shared it with, the ones who stood by you through thick and thin. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace, knowing that he had found his place in this world, alongside Lyra. As the celebrations began to quiet down in the distance, Lyra turned to him with a small, thoughtful smile. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had never met? If I had never come to you all those years ago?" Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I don't think I could have ever imagined my life without you in it. It's strange to think how much everything has changed. I came here to study, to explore, and never once did I think I'd find someone like you." Lyra smiled warmly, feeling the truth of his words settle in her chest. "I never expected this either. I thought I would always be searching for something. But now, I feel like I've found it." The two of them walked back toward the village, their steps in sync. The people cheered as they approached, greeting them with open arms. Lyra's heart swelled with pride for her people, for the unity they had shown in the face of adversity. She had done what she set out to do. She had led her people to a new era of peace. And now, she had a new goal, to build a future where her people could live freely, without fear. And Marcus, who had once been a stranger to this world, had found his place in it, not just as an explorer, but as someone who was part of something greater. He had become a part of Lyra's world, and she had become a part of his. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been apart. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Lyra and Marcus shared a quiet moment, the future ahead of them as bright as the sun overhead. They had faced challenges, fought for what mattered, and had come out victorious. But now, as they walked side by side, they knew that the real journey was just beginning. They didn't know what the future would hold. There would be more battles, more obstacles to overcome, but they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus realized that he wasn't afraid anymore. He had found his place. And it was with Lyra in her world, a world full of beauty, strength, and hope.